For fuck's sake, what we gonna do, for fuck's sake, the world's gone mad and I'm sharing it with you. For fuck's sake, so sit right down, grab a glass of wine, maybe a cup of tea and some chocolates, and join me for another For Fuck's Sake. Oh my God, I'm on. It's okay. I was taking the opportunity to have a bit of a snuggle with darling Frankie, who has decided he's going to take up residence in this sofa whenever I'm at the piano. Aretha Franklin is tearing a box apart. Very important work. Welcome to today's For Fuck's Sake. You join me again with the beasts, my darling babies, to introduce the second episode, part 2, in my conversation with the fabulous Jon Cleary. Okay, so we heard how he got to New Orleans. Today, we find out what next. I mean, he was a kid, he got there. What happened next? And let's be honest, it's all a bit spooky, isn't it? His story is very much like a bit of a whoo. Wait till you hear the synchronicity that occurs in this next part. Take it away, Jon.
So when I came here, I really spent the first 2 years here. I came here when I was just 18 and just out of school. But I spent 2 years just listening and shedding. And the house I moved into had a piano. A little shotgun house, double shotgun up by the Mississippi River, uptown, the other side of town.
Yeah.
Right by the levee. And it was, and the local bar was the Maple Leaf Bar, and the regular piano player on Tuesday nights was this guy called James Booker.
Oh my God.
And so Booker, and I got a job at the bar, and I was a pretty lousy painter. I'd never painted anything in my life, but the bar needed painting. The owner saw I needed a job, and he said, "Do you want to paint the bar?" I said, "Sure." So, but I would come in the morning before anybody else and play the piano, because the piano in the bar was better than the one I had at home.
Yeah.
And so it was a bit of a joke. I ended up spending more time in the daytime playing the piano than I was actually painting the bar. And then one night when Booker failed to show up, they got me up on the piano to keep the paying customers in, and that was my first piano
That's
gig.
a great story.
Yeah.
That is a great story.
Yeah, they said, make yourself useful. I was covered in green paint. They said, clean yourself up, get on the bloody piano and make yourself useful for a change. Because they're all going to start asking for their money back. And
I'm sure not.
Booker,
Now, so you got to tell me, what was it like? I don't know this. I had no idea that this is your experience. But what was it like seeing him, hearing him play? What?
Booker?
Yeah.
Well, now James Booker's really famous. There's films about him. There's all sorts of records available now that weren't then. At that time, there was one record, and he was just another eccentric character that came in the bar on a regular basis. He would often tell me, he would stay upstairs. So my experience of him was him giving me a hard time about what a lousy painter I was. You can't paint. What y'all doing here? You can't paint for shit. So I was like, fuck off, Booker.
With the eye patch.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing.
But he was odd. He was for people who aren't familiar with James Booker, Mac Rebennack described him as the best one-eyed, gay, junkie, genius piano player that New Orleans ever produced. And he kind of was. And he was, on some nights he was brilliant. More often than not, he'd get behind the piano, he'd be loaded. And it'd be, for hours, it'd be. I didn't really care for that stuff particularly. Yeah. But then you'd see him when he was on and he would play this. beautiful blues, or he'd play these ballads like. Gorgeous, dramatic chords, you know.
But
And that stuff blew my mind. I loved that stuff. So I saw him every Tuesday night for about 2 years. And that's just when he was playing. But he would come in the daytime and hang out in the bar because he got free drink. So I'd be outside painting, and he'd be the other side of the glass. You know, there's big windows at the front of the Maple Leaf. I'd be outside, and he'd be the other side of the glass just playing. And no one else, just me and him, basically. And I'd be on a typical Maple Leaf, I'd be on a ladder with a gallon of paint, a spliff, and a packet of crisps and a bottle of Dixie beer. Because that was
your
how
lunch, basically,
that's how
and
it
breakfast.
was. New Orleans was funkier then than it is now. You know.
It must have been. It's not gentrified, but it must be more. It must be
It
somewhat.
was kind of like a Wild West town. That's how it felt to me.
How it looks when you see any of the footage of this stuff, I must say.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is. It's sad. I mean, it's heartbreaking. Yeah, he was loaded, or he was great.
He was a pretty tortured guy, and he was, and then you know, there was always a cocktail of heroin and Canadian whiskey and whatever else, and cocaine. So sometimes he'd be quite chatty and we'd talk. Other times he'd just look right through you. He was just on a different planet. So you never really knew what you were getting in Booker. So I would never say that I knew him very well, but I saw him.
But what an extraordinary experience. Did you know anyone here when you first came here, or did you just literally land in the airport and come here, or did you drive here? How did you get into it? Where did you come from? Was it New York, Atlanta? What did you do?
Well, it was a dream that suddenly sort of turned into a reality very quickly. Me and my mate at school would hatch these great sort of exotic ideas for travel plans. We were going to try and rent a van in Cranbrook and drive it across Africa. And we neither of us even had a driving license. We weren't old enough to have a driver's license. And then I was to get gypsy caravans in Ireland, and just, we just wanted to get away, grow up, be a grown-up, leave home, be away from school and go and have an adventure. Yeah. And so I was always saying we should go to New Orleans. That's where I wanted to go to. But it was a pipe dream because we were kids, we were broke, no one had any money. And going to America in those days was a huge deal.
A big deal.
It was like
a huge deal.
I knew one person at school whose parents had been to America.
Yeah,
and it wasn't like it is now where everyone flies around. It was hugely expensive. But there was a new company called DHL that had just started, and my mate Dan heard that you could get a free flight to America if you let them use all your luggage space. And he found a phone number, and I went to the phone box in Cranbrook and rang them up. And they said, "Have you got a passport?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, come into London." And it was like a whirlwind. Before long, I actually had a date, and I was flying to New Orleans.
Good grief.
And so I had no money. I had £100, and Dan managed to get the same thing. So we're going to New Orleans. I thought, well, that's it. We're going to New Orleans. When you're 17, you don't tend to think about places like details like where you're actually going to stay.
Where do I live? Yeah. No, you don't, do you? It's just like, you don't even think this through. It's just
I'm just going. It's all going to fall into place. And you know what? It did fall into place. I was incredibly lucky. But it wouldn't have had I not gone up to hear my uncle's band playing at the Pegasus in Stoke Newington, this pub called the Pegasus. And his ex-girlfriend was there. And I told her I was going to New Orleans. And she said, "Where are you going to stay?" And I said, "I've got no idea." She looked at me like I was mad. And by coincidence, her sister was traveling through the States and had got as far as New Orleans and stayed and got a job as a bartender at this place called the Maple Leaf Bar.
Oh my good grief.
And she just received a letter from her that morning, inside which was a Maple Leaf Bar matchbox. And she gave me the matchbox. It had the phone number, 866-9359.
She remembered to this day.
And she said, "Call this when you get there and ask to speak to Fiona, and maybe she'll let you sleep on her floor for the first couple of nights." And that's exactly what happened. I called her from the airport. She said, get in a taxi, come to the Maple Leaf. So the flight was via New York, and I made a connection to New Orleans. And I got to the airport, tried to figure out which coin fit in the phone, because I'd never seen American money before. And got through to the bar, and I could hardly hear this voice. It was a busy night. I think it was a Friday night. And she said, just get in a taxi and ask for the Maple Leaf Bar uptown. And so the next thing, I actually set foot on American soil as the taxi draws up outside the Maple Leaf. I can't believe
you're there.
I'm there. And I walked into the bar, and there was this chord from the stage. It was Earl King was on the stage, and he went, there've been some lonely, lonely nights. Ah, baby, yeah, since you've been gone, I lay my head down on my pillow while I cried all night long. The things you used to say to me. And that was off. That was it. I couldn't believe it. That was one of my favourite songs. It was a version of it on that same record that had the Stagger Lee thing I played earlier on. And there, I'm in New Orleans. I'm at the Maple Leaf Bar, and there's Earl King, like 4 or 5 feet away from me. And the girl behind the bar said, "Are you Jonathan?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Okay, put your bag. Give us your bag. Here's your first Dixie beer. Welcome to New Orleans." And then she was busy serving. I said, "I'll see you at the end of the night." And I just sat there.
Soaking it all in.
Yes, and so I stayed with her, and then my friend Dan showed up a couple of days later, my mate from school. We were just laughing hilariously because we couldn't believe we'd actually pulled off a trip somewhere after idly joking and talking about it for so many years.
Yeah.
And so we found a place to stay, and then an apartment became available. We both got a job painting the bar, and then 2 more friends showed up. And before long, it was six teenagers from England, all with no parental supervision, all with jobs. We'd all found jobs.
Yeah.
We all had cash, and we were going out and
That's amazing.
having an absolute ball.
That is amazing.
So yeah, and I've been here ever since. Why would you leave?
Why would you? Well, that's the thing that you and I both know, but is that why would you ever leave, quite frankly?
Yeah.
The thing about, it's sort of like, I'm not going to use phrases like meant to be, I hate shit like that, but you know what I mean? There's sometimes you just think,
Don't you think there must be some fatalism
there's
at work?
something going
Yeah.
on. It's like you
Yeah.
tread off. There it is, first notes you hear, somebody that you adore. First time I went to Jazz Fest, I heard this voice and this song that I knew I'd heard when I was a kid, that my dad had heard on like Radio 2 or something, and we didn't know who it was, never could find out who it was. This is the first time I set foot in Jazz Fest, and it was Johnny Adams. And he was playing exactly the song that we had heard, and that had a snippet of it and knew it. And I had that kind of feeling.
How great that you got to see Johnny
Oh
Adams.
my God! I know that you worked a lot with him, and
Yeah,
I mean,
his band.
the fact that then so from that point, how long before? Okay, so then you got your first. When Booker wasn't okay, you get up on stage and now you're playing. So how long after that before you actually became like the pianist, the session guy that you had dreamt of being?
Well, that first 2 years I spent listening and learning, really. I didn't get to hardly any gigs. The Booker, singing for Booker, that was the first thing. And I only could play about 5 tunes on the piano, so I just exhausted my repertoire pretty quickly. But I bought lots of records and went to see lots of gigs.
Yeah.
And I thought, I loved it. I mean, I loved New Orleans so much. And I'd read a book called Walking to New Orleans that had come out about 3 or 4 years before, which was a definitive history by an Englishman from Kent
Oh no!
called John Broven. It was the definitive history of New Orleans rhythm and blues.
Kent, what is it with Kent and New Orleans?
Kent is from Sussex. I don't know.
All right,
Kent
that
and
makes
Sussex.
me feel slightly less anxious. I have to say, yes.
So it was 2 years, but that was my sort of, all my friends actually had left school and gone to university. This for me was my 2 years university study in New Orleans. Going to see as much as I could see. And at the end of which time my visa expired and I had to leave the country. So I went to England, and that's when I started hustling and got gigs and put bands together and started playing. And I ended up playing I was just doing like 7 to 10 gigs a week in London, solo piano, anything I could get. And I did that for nearly 2 years, during which time I actually got hired to play guitar for Dr. Jon when he was over and played in his band.
Wow.
And then he heard me play some piano, so he said, tonight you play piano and I'll play guitar. So we switched round. And I was about 19 or 20 then, I guess, 21, something like that.
How did that come about? I mean, was that
Well, when I got home, when I got back to England, I got a copy of Time Out, that was the listings magazine in London, and to see what was going on in London, what live music there was. My friend Dan had meantime moved back to England, and my girlfriend and Dan and his girlfriend had got a place in Bethnal Green in East London. And so I stayed with them. I'm in London now, very weird, after having come from New Orleans, been in New Orleans for 2 years. Because I went from a little village in Kent to New Orleans and then to London. So it was like
London's the big boy.
City.
Yeah.
And in the Time Out, it said there's a New Orleans style, Professor Longhair style band that's playing. And I heard this name came up a couple of times. Diz and the Doormen was the name of this band. So I went to see them. They were playing at a pub in Upper Street called the Hare and Hounds in Islington. And so I got there a bit early, and I'm sitting at the bar, and there's a guy comes in and stands next to me, big bloke with big bushy hair. And it turns out that's Diz. And we got chatting, and I said I'd just got back the day before from New Orleans, and his eyes lit up because he loved. He actually was taught by champion Jack Dupree.
Wow.
And he said, "You ever heard of a guy called James Booker?"
Oh.
And this is a time when no one knew who James Booker was. Even most people in New Orleans had no idea, had never heard of James Booker. But I said, "Yeah." And he seemed kind of surprised. And he was curious, but curious enough to ask if I wanted to sit in and do a couple of songs. And so that's exactly what I was after.
Yeah.
I just needed a foot in the door.
Yes.
And so I did. I got and played a couple of tunes and got house. The whole place went crazy. And then I went to his next gig, and he very kindly invited me up again. And at the end of that night, the guy that booked the music said, "Someone's just cancelled next week. Can you fill in and we'll just use Diz's rhythm section if they're available?" And the Diz's rhythm section was fantastic. It's a junkie bass player and an alcoholic drummer.
I'm sorry.
And when
I know I find this so funny, but as a musician, of course, I find it really funny.
No, they really played it right.
Yeah.
And the drummer was phenomenal. This London Irish lunatic called Kieran O'Connor. But he really played the 2 hands on the snare drum, press roll thing.
Yeah.
And so they backed me up, and he'd billed it as King Cleary. And he said, "Well, what's going to be the name of the band?" And when in New Orleans, I shared a place with a friend of mine called Eddie Savage, whose nickname was Moose. And I thought we always was joking with him, he should have a band called Savage Eddie and the Wild Mooses. And he said, I put King Cleary and what? I said, Savage Mooses. Right, so King Cleary and the Savage Mooses. That's a ridiculous name. But that was the name of the band. That's kind of what stuck.
Yeah.
And so then I started using them. The next gig, they weren't available, so they said, call these guys. So I called some other guys, and they came and played. No rehearsals or anything.
Yeah.
I just played, the New Orleans songbook. Easy stuff. And then when Mac Rebennack came over to England to do some gigs for the first time in 15 years or something, I guess he didn't travel because he was a junkie at that time, Dr. Jon. Someone had the idea of hooking him up with Diz and the Doormen as the backing band.
Ah.
And then they hired a guitar player who then couldn't make a couple of gigs, and then they said, did I want to come play guitar? And I had hair down to here. I looked an absolute scruff. But I went down and had a first rehearsal with Mac, who immediately moved in with the bass player because he was a junkie. So I went down, and he was in Brixton. So I turned up at the house with a guitar, and there was no piano, but Mac ran me through the whole set of that night. And then he was puzzled that I'd just come back from New Orleans and I lived on Ferret Street because that's where Freddie Staley, his old drummer, used to live. And I was asking him questions about Jesse Hill and people that normally wouldn't get asked questions about.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of curious. And then we had to do a World Service session for the BBC. And we did it. And then everybody left except me and Mac. I think every time he was waiting for a ride. I can't remember why it was just me and him there. But I pulled out a spliff, and we had a spliff in the BBC, which is kind of unheard of.
That's absolutely criminal. Can I just point that out? This is absolutely not. It's not done, Jon Cleary. It is not done in the.
It wasn't done at all.
Lady Queen BBC. That's just not right. Lady Beeb.
But then as we were like fooling around, Mac was at the piano and he started singing Fever. He was singing, "You give me pneumonia." I felt about laughing, but I had this record that my uncle gave me of Little Willie John's greatest hits, and it was a Little Willie John tune. So I said, "Oh man, you like Little Willie John?" Because I've been potty, that's what I've been listening to, is Little Willie John. He said, "How the fuck you know about Little Willie John?"
Yeah.
And I reached up to the piano. I said, "Well, my favorite one's this one." Well, now you're a sweetheart. Bad key. If ever there was one. And how the fuck you know that?
Yeah.
I said, "Oh man, I love Little Willie John." He said, "You know this one?" So anyway, we went on to a rip. So I pulled out another spliff. He went crazy about Little Willie John. And that's when he said, "Oh man, tonight on the gig." And I said, "Oh, look, hey man, am I doing this right?"
Yeah.
I said, "All right, stop." He said, "Tonight you play the piano on the gig and I'll play guitar. We'll fuck them up. Switch around. We'll do a little switch."
Again, you put yourself in the right place at the right time, but there's still something a little bit about it. It is. You do create opportunity, but that is kind of remarkable, just the same.
Matt, it's not just me. It's spooky, isn't it? The synchronicity in this man's life. I don't know whether, like I said, is it about putting yourself in the right place at the right time, or, taking opportunities when, if, and how they come to you. But the fact that it's such a bizarre set of situations. It's like I walked in here and then I walked in there. And I mean, the first episode was bad enough, but it just gets better and better. And this is a continued theme. Synchronicity. And I think all of us, don't we all have that moment in our lives? I have many where you just think, good God. And then I walked in and then I met this person, then suddenly that person saw me and then this happened. And we'd like it to happen more than it does often, but with him it's constant. But it's that thing, isn't it? The sliding doors thing, that if you took a different turn, if you'd gone through a different door, it would never have happened. I think we all know that feeling, but there is a bit of woo about it, I do believe. But anyway, that is, of course, episode 2. We will continue next week, the third installment with this marvelous, marvelous man. So now, to finish up, to close the show, another summer song, summer tinged, as we're careening towards the end of summer. God damn it. One would feel that it is important for us to just hold the fuck on to summer as long as possible and just really bathe and luxuriate in it, indulge in it. So here is another video of myself with the fabulous Pedro Segundo performing, yes, one of my favorites from Greece that has been turned into a torch song like no other. This is Summer Loving, Summer Nights. In the meantime, until I see you next Sunday, take care of yourselves, keep the masks on, tell them to go fuck themselves if they tell you to take them off. Look after yourself, please, all of you. This has been me, Judith Owen, with the mostest love, hostess with the mostest love of synchronicity, saying a right, ooh, spooky, for fuck's sake. Love you guys. Summer loving, you had a blast. Summer loving, it happened so fast. You said, I met a girl who's crazy for me. Oh, those summer flings that don't mean a thing. Whoa, oh, but those summer nights. She swam by you well, she got a cramp, and you ran over and you got your suit down. You saved her life 'cause she nearly drowned. Summer dreams ripped out the seams. Whoa, oh, but those summer nights. Tell me more. Was it love at first sight? Tell me more. Did she put up a It turned colder, that's how it ends. I bet you told her you'd still be friends. Do you wonder what she's doing now? Summer dreams ripped out the seams. Whoa, oh, but those summer nights. Ooh. Tell me more, why don't you just tell me more, why don't you just why don't you tell me more? Why don't you tell me more?